Lieutenant Commander Kim Nari walked through the long white hallways of the Galactic Defense Academy. Her boots made soft clicking sounds on the clean floor. The archive wing was always quiet at this time of morning. Most students were still, sleeping or eating breakfast in the main building. Nari stopped in front of a large metal door marked with warning signs in 12 different languages, the Battle Records Archive. She placed her palm on the scanner and waited for the green light. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside the archive room, thousands of data crystals lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Each crystal contained the complete record of a major battle from the last 50 years, ship movements, weapon discharges, communication logs, medical reports, death counts. Everything that happened during the galaxy's worst conflicts was stored here for future military officers to study. Nari knew these records better than anyone else at the academy. She had lived through 9 of them. At 28 years old, Nari looked older than her actual age. Her black hair was always pulled back in a neat bun. Her dark eyes held a distant look that made other instructors uncomfortable. The alien professors whispered about her in the faculty lounge. How could one human woman survive so many impossible battles when entire fleets were destroyed? The students whispered too. They called her the ghost walker behind her back. Some said she was cursed. Others believed she had made deals with dark forces. A few thought she was simply the luckiest person in the galaxy. None of them understood the real truth. Nari selected 9 data crystals from their storage slots and carried them to the main teaching platform. In 2 hours, she would begin her weekly seminar on advanced battle tactics. Today's lesson would focus on the siege of Kepler Station, the battle where she first earned her reputation as someone who could not die. She inserted the first crystal into the hologram projector and stepped back as the room filled with light. The battle began to play out in 3 dimensions around her. Ships appeared in the air above her head. Weapons fire streaked between them in bright lines of red and blue. She could see the space station where she had served as a young lieutenant 7 years ago. Nari watched herself on the recording. The young woman in the image wore the same uniform but looked so different. That Lieutenant Kim Nari had smiled. More. Her eyes had been bright with hope and excitement about serving in the fleet. She had believed in honor and glory, and fighting for the greater good. The door chimed softly. Nari turned off the projector and looked toward the entrance. Group of students filed into the room. 24 cadets from 17 different species. Humans. Altarians with their blue skin and 4 arms. Crystalline beings from the Vega system whose bodies caught the light like living diamonds. Flying creatures from the gas giants who wore special atmosphere suits to breathe. The human students always sat together in the front rows. There were 6 of them this semester. Cadet Lee Jiho bounced slightly in his seat with nervous energy. He reminded Nari of herself at that age, always eager to learn, always ready to volunteer for dangerous missions. She made a mental note to speak with him privately after class. Cadet Yoon Mira sat beside Jiho. She was quieter than the others but asked the hardest questions. Her test scores were the highest in the class. Nari suspected Mira would make an excellent tactical officer if she survived long enough to graduate. The alien students filled the remaining seats. Most of them treated these battle records like ancient history, interesting puzzles to solve, academic exercises with clear right and wrong answers. They did not understand that real people had died in these battles, that the decisions shown in the recordings had sent thousands of beings to their deaths. Nari activated the main display screen at the front of the room. Text appeared showing the basic facts about the siege of Kepler Station. Date of battle, forces involved, casualties, final outcome. The numbers were cold and simple. They did not tell the real story. The siege of Kepler Station lasted 18 days, Nari began. Her voice was steady and calm. Alliance forces were outnumbered 4-1. The enemy had superior firepower and better positioning. By all tactical calculations, the station should have fallen within the first week. Cadet Jiho raised his hand. But the station held out for 18 days. How did they manage that? Nari looked at the young man for a long moment. They held because someone made the hard choices. Choices that other officers could not make. She activated the hologram projector again. The battle resumed playing around them. Ships exploded in silent flashes of light. The station's defensive systems fired continuously at the attacking fleet. Small fighter craft darted between the larger vessels like angry insects. "Watch carefully," Nari said. "Notice how the defensive coordinator manages the power grid. When the main generators are damaged, she has to choose which systems to keep running. Life support, weapons, shields, communications. She cannot power everything." The students leaned forward to study the tactical displays. Nari could see them trying to work out the mathematics of survival. How many people could be saved with each decision? Which systems were most important for holding the station? The battle recording showed the critical moment. Enemy ships had broken through the outer defensive line. The station's main reactor was failing. The defensive coordinator had seconds to choose between powering the weapons or maintaining life support for the civilian areas. "What would you do?" Nari asked the class. Several students spoke at once. Some argued for keeping the weapons online to continue fighting. Others insisted that protecting civilians was more important. The debate grew heated as different species brought their own cultural values to the discussion. Nari let them argue for several minutes. Then she raised her hand for silence. The coordinator chose to power the weapons. She said quietly, 800 civilians died when life support failed in the residential sectors. But the weapons remained active long enough to destroy 2 enemy capital ships. This forced the attackers to pull back and regroup. The delay allowed Alliance reinforcements to arrive and break the siege. The room fell silent. Even the alien students looked uncomfortable now. The academic exercise had become something darker, a story about choosing who lives and who dies. Cadet Mira raised her hand slowly. How does the coordinator live with that choice, knowing that 800 people died because of her decision? Nari met the young woman's eyes. She lives with it by remembering why the choice was necessary. The station held 40,000 people. If it had fallen, they all would have died. Sometimes the only way to save many is to sacrifice few. But how does someone make that calculation? Jiho asked. How do you decide who deserves to live and who deserves to die? You don't, Nari replied. You decide what outcome serves the greater good, then you live with the consequences. The lesson continued for another hour. Nari walked the students through each phase of the battle. She explained the tactical decisions, the resource management, the communication protocols, everything that military textbooks taught about commanding under pressure. But she did not tell them about the nights she had spent awake in the station's command center, the faces of the dead that appeared in her dreams, the weight of responsibility that pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe, the way her hands shook for months after the battle ended. When class finished, the students filed out quietly. Most of them looked troubled by what they had learned. The alien cadets discussed the tactical lessons in small groups. The human students walked alone, lost in their own thoughts. Only Cadet Mira remained behind. She approached Nari's desk carefully, as if walking through a minefield. Commander Kim, she said softly. May I ask you something? Nari looked up from gathering her materials. Yes. The defensive coordinator at Kepler Station. Her name was Lieutenant Kim Nari. That was you, wasn't it? Nari was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded once. How do you do it? Mira asked. How do you teach us about battles where you watched people die? Where you made the choices that killed them? Nari finished packing her materials and stood up. Because if I don't teach you, you'll have to learn the same lessons on your own, and that means more people will die unnecessarily. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at the young cadet. The hardest part isn't making the choice, Cadet Mira. The hardest part is accepting that someone has to make it. Better that someone with experience carries that burden than someone who has never faced it before. Nari left the archive room and walked back through the quiet hallways. Behind her, Cadet Mira stood alone among the holographic displays of a battle that ended 7 years ago, but would never truly be over. 3 days after her class on the siege of Kepler Station, Nari received an urgent message on her personal communicator. The small device buzzed against her wrist during her morning exercise routine. She stopped running on the academy's track and checked the display. Admiral Park Dong-yun wanted to see her immediately in his office. Nari had worked under Admiral Park for 2 years since joining the academy as an instructor. He was one of the few senior officers who understood what she had been through during her combat years. Park had also served in the fleet during some of the worst battles. He knew the cost of survival better than most people. The Admiral's office was located on the top floor of the Academy's main building. Large windows looked out over the training grounds where cadets practiced combat maneuvers. Nari could see her students from yesterday's class running obstacle courses under the morning sun. They looked so young and eager from this distance. Admiral Park stood behind his desk reviewing holographic displays when Nari entered. The displays showed star maps with red markers indicating recent battle sites. 3 separate locations along the Alliance border with the Zephyrian Concordat. Park looked tired and older than his 50 years. "Sit down, Nari," he said without looking up from the displays. "We have a problem." Nari took the chair across from his desk and waited. Park gestured to the star maps floating in the air between them. 3 days ago, Zephyrian forces attacked Alliance colonies at New Carthage, Meridian 7, and the Outer Reach mining station. All 3 attacks followed the same pattern: fast strikes, overwhelming force, complete destruction of military targets, then immediate withdrawal before reinforcements could arrive. Nari studied the tactical data scrolling beside each red marker. "Sounds like standard hit-and-run tactics. The Zephyrians have used similar approaches before." "That's what we thought at first," Park said. He touched a control and new information appeared. But then our intelligence analysts noticed something strange. The attack patterns weren't just similar to previous Zephyrian operations. They were identical to historical Alliance battles. Park highlighted specific sections of the tactical reports. New Carthage was attacked using the same methods as the Battle of Proxima 7. Meridian 7 followed the pattern from the asteroid field campaign. The mining station assault matched the tactics from the siege of Kepler Station. Nari felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Those are all battles from the archive records." "Exactly." Park turned off the displays and sat down across from her. "Someone has been studying our historical battles and using our own tactics against us. But here's the really disturbing part. All 3 battles have something else in common." Nari already knew what he was going to say. "I was there. I survived all 3. The office door chimed and another person entered. Captain Han Suki from Alliance Military Intelligence. Nari had met her briefly during faculty meetings but never worked with her directly. Suki was in her early 30s with sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. She carried a secured datapad and looked like she had not slept in days. "Commander Kim," Suki said as she took the 3rd chair. "I've been reviewing classified battle records for the past 72 hours. I need to ask you some questions about your service record." Suki activated her datapad and projected new information into the air. Personnel files, medical reports, psychological evaluations, records from each of the 9 major battles where Nari had been the sole survivor from her unit. "According to these files, you served in frontline combat units for 6 years. During that time, you participated in 43 separate engagements. 9 of those battles resulted in the complete destruction of your assigned unit. In each case, you were the only survivor." Nari kept her expression neutral. "That information is correct. The statistical probability of surviving 9 separate extinction-level events is approximately 1 in 7 billion, Suki continued. "Either you're the luckiest person in the galaxy, or you possess tactical skills that allowed you to survive when others could not." "What's your point, Captain?" Suki leaned forward. "My point is that someone has been studying not just the official battle records, but your personal survival methods. The recent attacks show tactical adaptations that could only come from understanding how individual soldiers survived impossible situations." She brought up new displays, showing combat footage from the recent attacks. "Look at this footage from New Carthage. The attackers deliberately left escape routes open in specific locations, routes that match the paths you used to survive the original Battle of Proxima 7. Nari watched the footage with growing unease. The attack patterns were not just similar to the historical battles. They incorporated lessons learned from her own survival experiences. Someone had studied how she escaped when everyone else died. At Meridian 7, the attackers used communication jamming techniques that forced defenders to rely on visual signals. Suki continued. The same improvised communication methods you developed during the asteroid field campaign when your unit's radios were destroyed. Park activated another display, showing the mining station attack. The most disturbing example is from the outer reach. The attackers used a tactic that doesn't appear in any official military manual. They targeted the station's power grid in a specific sequence that forced the defenders to choose between weapons and life support. Nari recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same impossible choice she had faced at Kepler Station. The choice that still haunted her dreams 7 years later. Someone knows exactly how you survived these battles, Suki said quietly. They're using your survival strategies to make the same scenarios even deadlier for current Alliance forces. Admiral Park stood up and walked to the window. The question is how they got access to classified information about your experiences. Your debriefing reports from each battle were sealed at the highest security levels. Nari thought back to the long hours she had spent in debriefing rooms after each battle. Military psychiatrists asking endless questions about her decisions. Intelligence officers wanting detailed descriptions of enemy tactics. Medical examiners studying how she had survived injuries that killed others. There were dozens of people involved in my debriefings after each battle, she said. Doctors, psychiatrists, intelligence analysts, security officers. Any of them could have kept copies of the reports. We're investigating all personnel who had access to your files, Suki replied. But that could take weeks or months. In the meantime, more colonies could be attacked using these adapted tactics. Park turned away from the window. Which brings us to why you're here. We need someone who understands these battle patterns from personal experience. Someone who can predict how the enemy might adapt their strategies. Nari understood what he was asking. You want me to leave the academy and return to active combat duty? Not exactly, Park said. We want you to lead a special investigation team. Your job would be to visit the attacked colonies and analyze the tactical evidence. Help us understand how the enemy is using your survival experiences against us. The room fell silent as Nari considered the proposal. For 2 years she had found peace at the academy. Teaching young officers gave her life purpose without the constant threat of death. She had built a routine that helped keep the nightmares manageable. But she also knew that her unique experiences made her the only person qualified for this mission. No one else had survived the same battles. No one else could recognize the subtle adaptations being made to her survival tactics. What kind of team are you talking about? She asked. Captain Suki consulted her datapad. Small and mobile. Intelligence specialists, tactical analysts, maybe a few of your advanced students if you think they're ready for field experience. Nari thought about cadets Jiho and Mira. They had shown real potential during yesterday's class. But they were still students, still innocent in the way she had been before her first real battle. I'll need full operational authority, she said finally. No interference from higher command once we're in the field. Park nodded. Agreed. And I choose my own team members. Of course. When do we leave? Suki stood up and gathered her materials. Transport leaves tomorrow morning. We'll visit New Carthage first. The attack there was the most recent and the evidence should still be fresh. After Suki left, Admiral Park remained standing by the window. Are you sure about this, Nari? You've built a good life here at the academy. Going back into the field could undo all the progress you've made. Nari thought about the faces of her students. Young and eager and trusting that their instructors would prepare them for the realities of war. They deserved better than to face enemies who had studied every method of survival and turned those methods into weapons. Someone is using my experiences to kill Alliance personnel, she said quietly. That makes it my responsibility to stop them. She left Park's office and walked through the academy halls toward the student dormitories. She needed to speak with cadets Jiho and Mira about joining a mission that would take them far from the safety of their classrooms. For the first time in 2 years, Nari felt the familiar weight of command settling on her shoulders. The weight of making decisions that would determine who lived and who died. She had hoped never to carry that burden again. The transport ship carrying Nari's investigation team dropped out of hyperspace near New Carthage at dawn. Through the viewports, the mining colony looked peaceful from orbit. Green forests covered most of the continent. Small cities dotted the landscape like jewels. Only the burn marks around the main spaceport showed signs of recent battle. Nari stood in the ship's briefing room studying tactical displays with her team. She had chosen 5 people for this mission. Captain Han Suki, from Military Intelligence, Commander Cho Hyun-woo, a veteran officer who had fought in the Outer Rim conflicts, and 3 of her best students from the academy. Cadet Lee Jiho sat at the front table taking careful notes. His enthusiasm reminded Nari of herself at that age. Always eager to learn, always ready to volunteer for dangerous assignments. She hoped this mission would not destroy that enthusiasm, the way her early battles had changed her. Cadet Yoon Mira studied the colony's defensive layouts on her personal tablet. Her analytical mind was already working through the tactical problems. How had the attackers penetrated the orbital defenses? Where had they concentrated their assault? What weaknesses had they exploited? The third student was Cadet Kim Dae-hyun, a communications specialist who had graduated top of his class in electronic warfare. His job would be analyzing how the attackers had jammed Alliance communications during the battle. The attack began at 0347 local time. Captain Suki briefed the team. Zephyrian forces used stealth ships to approach the colony undetected. They launched simultaneous strikes against the orbital defense platforms in the main spaceport. Commander Cho highlighted key locations on the tactical display. The attackers showed detailed knowledge of the colony's defensive weaknesses. They knew exactly where to hit to disable communications and prevent reinforcements from launching. Nari watched the attack pattern unfold on the displays. The tactical approach looked familiar, but she could not immediately place where she had seen it before. The precision was too perfect, too organized for a standard raid. How long did the battle last? She asked. 18 hours, Suki replied. The same duration as the siege of Kepler Station. That connection sent a chill through Nari. The attackers were not just copying general tactics. They were recreating specific battles down to the timing. The transport ship landed at New Carthage's damaged spaceport an hour later. Local security forces met the team at the landing pad. The base commander was Colonel Wang Minji, a middle-aged woman who looked exhausted from days of managing the aftermath. Commander Kim, Colonel Wang said as they shook hands. I've heard about your service record. We're grateful for any help you can provide. Wang led the team through the damaged sections of the spaceport. Blast marks covered the walls where weapons fire had torn through defensive positions. Emergency repair crews worked to restore damaged systems. The air still smelled like smoke and burned metal. The attackers knew exactly where to hit, Wang explained as they walked. They targeted our communication arrays first, then the power generators, finally the weapons systems. Each strike was precisely timed to maximize damage. Nari examined the blast patterns on the walls. The weapons fire had come from multiple angles but followed a specific sequence. First suppressing fire to pin down defenders, then concentrated, bursts to destroy key systems. Finally, cleanup sweeps to eliminate remaining resistance. She had seen this pattern before during the Battle of Meridian Colonies 8 years ago, but there was something different about how it had been applied here. Something more systematic and cold. Were there any survivors from the defensive units? She asked. Colonel Wang's expression darkened. 17 out of 200. The attackers seemed to know exactly how to trap our people in positions where they couldn't retreat or call for help. They continued the tour through the main colony, settlement. Most of the civilian areas had been left untouched. The attackers had focused entirely on military and communications targets. But Nari noticed something strange about which buildings had been damaged and which had been preserved. Captain Suki, she called. Look at this damage pattern. The attackers destroyed the main communication center but left the backup relay station intact. They disabled the primary power grid but preserved the emergency generators. Suki studied the pattern and nodded slowly. They knew exactly what infrastructure to destroy and what to leave functional. Almost like they wanted to leave the colony capable of basic survival, but unable to call for help or organize effective resistance. Cadet Mira pointed to a partially destroyed building near the town center. That was the Colonial Defense Headquarters. But look how the damage is concentrated on the upper floors. The ground-level archives and computer systems are mostly intact. Nari felt that familiar cold feeling in her stomach. They wanted to preserve the records. The same way I preserved tactical information during my battles to help with later analysis. The team spent the rest of the day examining battle sites around the colony. Each location showed the same precise targeting, the same systematic approach to disabling defenses while preserving useful infrastructure. It was not random destruction. It was surgical removal of military capabilities. That evening, the team gathered in their temporary quarters to review the evidence. Commander Cho had compiled detailed reports from survivor interviews. The stories were consistent and disturbing. Multiple. Survivors report that the attackers seemed to anticipate every defensive move, Cho said. When colonial forces tried to fall back to secondary positions, the enemy was already waiting for them. When they attempted to establish communication with orbital defenses, the jamming started before they could complete the calls. Cadet Daehyun looked up from his electronic analysis equipment. The jamming patterns are identical to techniques used during the asteroid field campaign, but they've been adapted to counter the improved communication systems we use now. Nari remembered the asteroid field campaign vividly. Her unit had been cut off from command for 6 days. She had improvised new communication methods using emergency, beacons, and visual signals. Those same improvised techniques were now being used against Alliance forces. Someone has been studying not just the official battle records, she said quietly. They know the personal survival methods I developed during each engagement. Captain Suki activated a secure holographic projector. We found something else during our investigation, hidden in the Colonial Defense computer systems. The hologram showed documents that made Nari's blood run cold. Tactical manuals written in her own handwriting, personal notes she thought had been destroyed years ago during her debriefing sessions. Analysis reports describing exactly how she had survived when others died. These files were uploaded to the Colonial Defense Network 3 days before the attack, Suki continued. Someone wanted the defenders to have access to your survival strategies, but the information was incomplete. It showed your tactics but not the full context of why they worked. Nari studied her own handwriting floating in the air. Notes about power management during the Kepler station siege. Communication protocols from the asteroid field campaign. Psychological techniques for maintaining morale when facing impossible odds. They set a trap, she realized. The colonial defenders tried to use my survival methods, but they didn't understand the complete tactical situation. The attackers knew exactly how to counter each technique because they had studied the original battles. Commander Cho stood up and walked to the window. It's like fighting an enemy who has read your personal diary. They know not just what you did, but why you did it and how you think. The team worked late into the night analyzing the captured documents. Each file revealed more personal details about Nari's combat experiences, her fears, her decision-making process. The psychological tricks she used to keep functioning when everything around her was falling apart. Cadet Jiho found the most disturbing document near midnight. A psychological profile analyzing Nari's survivor guilt and how it influenced her tactical choices. The report was written by someone with detailed knowledge of military psychiatry and battlefield trauma. Whoever wrote this understands exactly how your mind works during combat, he said quietly. They know which decisions will be hardest for you to make, which situations will trigger your protective instincts for other people. Nari read through the psychological analysis with growing unease. The author had identified patterns in her behavior that she did not even recognize herself, ways that her past losses influenced her current choices, emotional triggers that could be exploited in combat situations. This isn't just military intelligence, she said. This is personal. Someone has been studying me specifically for a long time, long enough to understand my psychology better than I understand it myself. Captain Suki gathered the documents and sealed them in a secure container. We need to get this information back to Alliance Command immediately, but first we should investigate the other attack sites. If this pattern is consistent, we might be able to identify who has access to such detailed personal records. As the team prepared to leave New Carthage the next morning, Colonel Wang pulled Nari aside for a private conversation. Commander, I wanted you to know that several of my officers recognized your survival techniques in those captured documents. You've become something of a legend among frontline troops. Nari's team returned to the Galactic Defense Academy after investigating all 3 attack sites. The evidence was clear and frightening. Someone with access to the most classified military records was using her personal survival strategies as weapons against the Alliance. But they still had no idea who was responsible or how to stop the next attack. The transport ship docked at the Academy's main landing bay just after sunset. Emergency lights flashed red along the docking platform. Security teams in full combat gear surrounded the landing area. Something was very wrong. Admiral Park met them at the airlock with grim news. We've had a security breach. Someone accessed the main archive computers 2 hours ago. They downloaded classified battle records before our security systems could stop them. Nari felt her stomach drop. Which records? All of them. Every battle you survived. Every tactical analysis. Every psychological evaluation. They took everything we had about your service history and the battles you lived through. Captain, Suki checked her tactical scanner. Are we under attack? Park shook his head. Not yet, but our intelligence sources indicate that Zephyrian forces are massing near the border. We think they're preparing for a major offensive using the information they just stole. The Academy's halls buzzed with nervous energy as faculty and students prepared for possible combat. Emergency protocols had been activated. Non-essential personnel were being evacuated to safer locations. Combat instructors were issuing weapons to senior cadets. Nari gathered her team in the tactical planning room, the same room where she had taught classes about surviving impossible battles. Now they might have to use those lessons to survive an actual attack. The breach came from inside the academy, Commander Cho reported after reviewing security logs. Someone with legitimate access codes downloaded the files, not an external hacker or enemy infiltrator. Cadet Daehyun worked at a computer terminal analyzing the data theft. The access codes belonged to Dr. Ro Seungjae from the Military Psychology Department. He was one of the officers who debriefed you after the Battle of the Void Nebula. Nari remembered Dr. Ro from her debriefing sessions 5 years ago. A brilliant researcher who specialized in combat trauma and survivor psychology. He had spent weeks analyzing her experiences and writing detailed reports about how humans processed extreme battlefield stress. Where is Dr. Ro now? She asked. Admiral Park activated a holographic display showing the Academy's layout. Security cameras show him in the archive wing 30 minutes ago, but we lost visual contact when someone disabled the surveillance system in that section. The lights in the planning room suddenly flickered and went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light. Through the windows, Nari could see explosions in the distance. The Academy was under attack. All units to defensive positions. Park's voice echoed through the building's communication system. This is not a drill. Enemy forces have breached the outer perimeter. Nari's team moved quickly through the Academy's corridors toward their assigned defensive positions. Students and faculty ran in organized groups toward evacuation points or weapons lockers. The training exercises were becoming reality. They reached the archive wing just as the first enemy soldiers broke through the main entrance. Zephyrian troops in black armor advanced through the hallways using tactics that looked disturbingly familiar. The same careful room-clearing techniques Nari had developed during urban combat missions. They're using your close-quarters combat methods, Cadet Mira observed as they took cover behind an overturned desk, but adapted for attacking instead of defending. The battle for the archive wing began exactly like the siege of Kepler Station. Enemy forces concentrated their firepower on communication systems and power generators. They moved in coordinated teams that anticipated every defensive response. Someone had studied her survival strategies and turned them into an attack plan. Nari found herself making the same impossible choices she had faced 7 years ago: save the wounded or hold the defensive line, preserve ammunition or provide covering fire for evacuating civilians, protect the archives or protect the people. Commander Cho was hit by enemy fire while covering a group of evacuating students. As he fell, he looked at Nari with understanding. They both knew she would have to choose between stopping to help him or maintaining the defensive position. "Go," he gasped through his communication device. "The mission is more important than one person." Nari left him behind and continued fighting. The same decision she had made dozens of times during her combat years. The decision that kept her alive while others died. The decision that haunted her dreams every night. The attackers pushed deeper into the academy using perfect knowledge of the building's layout. They knew which corridors led to dead ends, which rooms had multiple exits, which areas could be easily defended or easily bypassed. "They have the complete building schematics," Captain Suki reported over the tactical channel, "plus detailed intelligence about our defensive capabilities. This is not a random assault, it's a specifically designed test." A test. That word made everything clear to Nari. This was not just an attack on the academy. It was an experiment designed to see if she would make the same choices that kept her alive during previous battles. The enemy forces drove the defenders back toward the main archive vault, the same tactical pressure that had forced her to retreat during the Kepler station siege. They were recreating that battle exactly, waiting to see if she would make the same decisions. Admiral Park's voice crackled over the communication system. "All remaining units fall back to evacuation point 3. We're abandoning the archive wing." But Nari knew they could not simply evacuate. The archive vault contained the complete battle records of every major Alliance engagement for the past 50 years. If that information fell into enemy hands, they could analyze and counter every tactical doctrine the Alliance had developed. She also realized that this attack was personal. Dr. Rowe was not just trying to steal information. He was trying to prove something about human psychology and the nature of survival. He wanted to demonstrate that her reputation as an impossible survivor was based on luck rather than skill. "We have to destroy the archives," she told her team, over their private channel. "If we can't hold this position, we have to make sure the enemy gets nothing." Cadet Jiho looked shocked. "Destroy all those historical records, all the lessons from previous battles. Better that those lessons die with us than be used against future Alliance forces." Nari replied. "Sometimes the only way to win is to make sure nobody else can either." She led her remaining team members toward the archive vault's central control room. Enemy soldiers pursued them through corridors lined with data storage units. Each unit contained the complete record of battles where thousands of people had died. Destroying them felt like erasing the memory of everyone who had sacrificed their lives for the Alliance. But keeping those records safe was more important than preserving them. The tactical information they contained was too valuable to risk letting enemies capture. In the control room, Nari activated the archive's emergency destruction sequence. Computer screens showed warnings in multiple languages. The system required confirmation codes from 2 senior officers before it would proceed. Admiral Park provided his authorization code remotely. Nari entered her own code with steady hands. The same hands that had made similar choices during 9 previous battles. The same hands that had condemned people to death by prioritizing missions over individuals. "Archive destruction will commence in 60 seconds, the computer announced. "All personnel evacuate immediately." Nari's team ran toward the emergency exits as explosions began destroying the data storage units behind them. 50 years of military history was being erased to prevent one person from using that knowledge as a weapon. They reached the evacuation shuttles just as the final explosions destroyed the archive wing. Through the shuttle windows, Nari watched flames consume the building, where she had taught students about surviving impossible battles. The irony was not lost on her. She had survived another impossible battle by making the same hard choices that defined her military career. But this time, the cost was not just human lives. It was the complete record of everything the Alliance had learned about warfare. As the evacuation shuttles carried survivors away from the burning academy, Nari wondered if Dr. Rowe had gotten the answer he was looking for. Did her survival prove she was exceptionally skilled or exceptionally lucky? Did the choices she made demonstrate tactical genius or simple selfishness? The only thing she knew for certain was that the war was far from over. Dr. Rowe had the information. He needed to continue his experiments. And somewhere in the galaxy, more Alliance personnel would face battles designed specifically to exploit their survival instincts. The Academy was gone. But the real test was just beginning. The evacuation shuttles landed at an emergency staging area, 50 kilometers from the burning Academy. Temporary shelters housed the survivors, while medical teams treated the wounded. Nari sat outside the command tent watching smoke rise from the direction of her former workplace. Admiral Park approached with updates from Alliance Command. His face showed the strain of losing the galaxy's most important military training facility. Hundreds of years of institutional knowledge had been destroyed in one night. How many casualties? Nari asked. 17 confirmed dead, 43 wounded. Commander Cho is in critical condition, but stable. Park sat down beside her on a supply crate. It could have been much worse if you hadn't ordered the evacuation. When you did, Nari did not feel like she deserved credit for minimizing casualties. Those 17 people were dead because someone had used her survival strategies as weapons. Her experiences had been turned into tools for killing the very people she was supposed to protect. Captain Suki emerged from the command tent with new intelligence reports. We've intercepted Zephyrian communications. Dr. Rowe is not working for them. He's been conducting his own private war using stolen military resources. What do you mean? Park asked. Rowe has been recruiting disaffected military personnel from multiple species, former soldiers who lost friends or family in battles where human officers made controversial survival decisions. He's convinced them that human tactical doctrine is fundamentally flawed. Nari understood immediately. He thinks human willingness to sacrifice individuals for larger objectives makes us dangerous allies. He's trying to prove that our survival instincts are actually a threat to galactic peace. Suki nodded. His ultimate goal is to discredit human military leadership and remove humans from command positions in the Alliance fleet. The attacks on the colonies were just the first phase. What's the second phase? Admiral Park asked. Before Suki could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the camp. Enemy aircraft appeared on the horizon, moving fast toward their position. The survivors had nowhere to run. No defensive positions to occupy. No weapons capable of stopping military aircraft. Everyone into the emergency bunkers, Park shouted over the alarm noise. Move quickly, but stay calm. Nari watched the panicked evacuation with growing certainty that this was exactly what Dr. Rowe wanted. Another, impossible survival scenario, where she would be forced to make the same hard choices that defined her military career. He was not trying to kill her. He was trying to break her. The underground bunkers could not hold everyone. There were 300 survivors from the Academy, but the bunkers had capacity for only 200 people. Nari would have to decide who got the protection of the bunkers and who remained exposed to the coming attack. She found herself standing at the bunker entrance with a list of names, making the same calculation she had made during the Kepler station siege. Save the most valuable personnel or save the most vulnerable. Prioritize military officers or civilian faculty. Choose who lived and who died. Admiral Park and senior staff go to Bunker 1, she announced. Medical personnel and wounded go to Bunker 2. Students and junior faculty go to Bunker 3. But the numbers did not work. Too many people for too few spaces. 50 people would have to remain above ground during the attack. 50 people whose survival would depend entirely on luck rather than tactical planning. Cadet Jiho volunteered to stay above ground. Then Cadet Mira. Then dozens of other students who understood what Nari was going through. They knew she was being forced to make an impossible choice, and they wanted to make it easier for her. No, Nari said firmly. Students go into the bunkers. Faculty members stay above ground. We knew the risks when we chose military careers. The aircraft attack began just as the bunker doors sealed. Weapons fire streaked across the camp, destroying temporary buildings and equipment. Nari and 49 other faculty members took cover wherever they could find it, behind supply containers, under damaged vehicles, in drainage ditches. The attack followed the same pattern as Dr. Rowe's previous operations: systematic destruction of military targets, careful preservation of civilian facilities, precise timing designed to maximize psychological pressure on the survivors. But this time, Nari recognized the pattern before it completed. The attackers were not trying to kill everyone above ground. They were herding the survivors toward a specific location where Dr. Rowe was waiting. She led the surviving faculty members toward the camp's communication center instead of away from the attack. It was the most dangerous location during an airstrike, but also the most likely place to find answers. Dr. Rowe stood in the communication center surrounded by holographic displays showing the battle. He looked older than she remembered from her debriefing sessions. His hair was gray and his eyes held the distant look of someone who had spent too much time studying other people's trauma. "Commander Kim," he said without turning around, "I wondered if you would figure out the pattern. Your tactical instincts are even better than my research suggested. End the attack, Doctor. You've made your point." Rowe gestured to the displays around him. "Have I? Look at the tactical decisions you made tonight. You abandoned a wounded comrade to maintain a defensive position. You destroyed irreplaceable historical records to deny them to enemies. You selected which people would live and which would die based on cold military calculations. Nari kept her weapon trained on him but did not fire. Those decisions saved lives. Those decisions revealed the fundamental flaw in human psychology," Rowe replied. "You are willing to sacrifice anything or anyone to achieve tactical objectives. That makes you dangerous allies for species that value individual lives over strategic goals." The communication displays showed footage from all of Nari's previous battles: the siege of Kepler Station, the Battle of the Void Nebula, every engagement where she had survived by making choices that other officers could not make. "I spent 5 years studying your service record," Rowe continued, "analyzing every decision, every survival strategy, every psychological mechanism you used to justify sacrificing others for the greater good. And what did you conclude? That human military doctrine is based on acceptable losses rather than preserving lives. Your species treats individual deaths as statistical inevitabilities instead of preventable tragedies. That philosophy is spreading to other alliance militaries and making all of us more willing to sacrifice each other." Nari lowered her weapon slightly. "So you decided to prove your theory by creating situations where I would make the same choices. I created controlled experiments using your own experiences as the baseline," Rowe said. "Each attack was designed to test whether you would prioritize missions over people when faced with identical tactical problems. And if I had made different choices, if I had tried to save everyone instead of completing the missions, then you would have proven that humans can learn to value individual lives over tactical objectives, that your reputation as an impossible survivor was based on luck rather than a systematic willingness to sacrifice others." The holographic displays changed to show the current situation: the bunkers where 300 people waited for the all-clear signal, the aircraft circling overhead ready to resume their attack, the communication equipment that could call for alliance reinforcements. "I'm offering you one final test," Rowe said quietly. "Use this communication system to call alliance forces. Tell them our exact location. They can arrive in 6 hours and capture me and my followers. What's the catch? The communication signal will also reveal the location of the emergency bunkers to my aircraft. They will have 6 hours to eliminate everyone hiding underground before alliance forces arrive. Another impossible choice. Save herself and complete the mission by calling for help, but condemn 300 people to certain death, or protect the bunkers by staying silent, but allow Dr. Rowe to escape and continue his experiments." Nari stared at the communication equipment for a long moment. The same type of device she had used to call for evacuation during the Kepler Station siege. The same choice between individual lives and larger objectives that had defined her entire military career. "There's a third option," she said finally, "which is, I tell everyone the truth about what you're really testing. Let them decide for themselves whether completing the mission is worth the risk to their lives. Nari activated the camp's internal communication system. Her voice reached everyone in the bunkers and everyone still fighting above ground. "This is Commander Kim. I want you to know exactly what we're facing and what choices we have to make together." Nari's voice echoed through the emergency camp's communication system, reaching everyone hiding in the bunkers and fighting above ground. For the first time in her military career, she was going to tell the complete truth about an impossible, tactical situation. "My name is Kim Nari. For 6 years I served in frontline combat units where I survived 9 battles that killed everyone else in my unit. For 2 years I've taught classes about those battles at the academy. Tonight someone is using my survival experiences as weapons against all of us." Dr. Rowe watched her speak with scientific curiosity. His experiment was entering uncharted territory. None of his psychological models had predicted this response. "The person behind these attacks believes that human tactical doctrine is fundamentally flawed," Nari continued. "He thinks we are too willing to sacrifice individual lives for strategic objectives. He's been testing this theory by recreating the exact situations where I made those difficult choices." Through the bunker communication system, she could hear people talking quietly among themselves, students discussing what they had learned in her classes, faculty members sharing their own combat experiences, wounded personnel describing battles they had survived. "Right now we face the same choice I've made in every major battle. We can call Alliance forces for help, but doing so will reveal our location to enemy aircraft. 300 people will die so that our mission can succeed. Or we can protect the bunkers by staying silent. But the person responsible for all these attacks will escape to continue his experiments." Admiral Park's voice came through the communication system from Bunker 1. "Commander, what are your tactical recommendations?" "I don't have any, sir. For once, I'm not going to make the choice alone. Everyone affected by this decision should have a voice in making it." Dr. Rowe looked genuinely surprised. "This is not how military command structures function, Commander. Officers make tactical decisions based on training and experience. Soldiers follow orders without debating strategy." "Maybe that's the problem," Nari replied. "Maybe the reason I survived those battles wasn't because I made better tactical choices. Maybe it was because I was willing to carry the psychological burden of those choices so other people didn't have to." The communication system came alive with voices from all 3 bunkers, students and faculty discussing the tactical situation, weighing the risks of each option, sharing personal stories about friends and family they had lost in previous battles. Cadet Jiho spoke first from Bunker 3. "Commander Kim, you taught us that survival sometimes requires sacrificing few to save many. But you also taught us that someone has to live with the consequences of that choice. I volunteer to help you make this decision." "So do I," said Cadet Mira from the same bunker. "Whatever choice we make it together." More voices joined in. Captain Suki from Bunker 2, wounded faculty members who understood the cost of tactical decisions. Even civilian staff who had no military training but wanted to contribute to the discussion. "This is fascinating," Dr. Rowe murmured as he listened to the debate. "Humans sharing the psychological burden of command decisions. I did not anticipate this response in any of my models." "Because you were studying individual psychology instead of group dynamics," Nari told him. "You analyzed how I made choices, in isolation, but you missed how those choices were shaped by my responsibility to other people." The discussion in the bunkers continued for 30 minutes. People shared memories of the battles Nari had survived. They talked about friends who had died and communities that had been saved. They debated whether tactical success justified individual sacrifices. Finally, Admiral Park's voice cut through the conversation. "We've reached a consensus. Call Alliance forces. But before you do, everyone in the bunkers wants you to know something." "What's that, sir?" "We've been talking about your service record, about the battles you survived and the choices you made, and we want you to understand that we don't consider you a survivor of those battles." Nari felt confused. "I don't understand." Cadet Mira's voice came through clearly from Bunker 3. "You didn't survive those battles, Commander. You won them. Every tactical decision you made, Every person you chose to save or sacrifice. Every mission you completed while others died. You won those battles by carrying a burden that would have broken most people. The real test wasn't whether you could survive impossible situations, Captain Suki added from Bunker 2. The test was whether you could keep making those hard choices without losing your humanity. And you passed that test every time. Ro stared at the communication equipment with growing understanding. They're reframing the entire psychological paradigm. Instead of viewing survival as selfish self-preservation, they're treating it as community service. Call the Alliance Forces, Commander, Admiral Park ordered. We'll take our chances with the aircraft, but whatever happens, know that 300 people chose to trust your judgment one more time. Nari activated the long-range communication array. Within minutes, she had contacted Alliance Command and provided their exact coordinates. Reinforcements would arrive in 6 hours, the same amount of time Dr. Rowe's aircraft would need to eliminate everyone in the bunkers. Fascinating, Dr. Rowe said as he gathered his research materials. You've created a tactical situation where individual sacrifice becomes collective empowerment. I'll need years to analyze the psychological implications. You're not going anywhere, Doctor. Of course I am. My aircraft will begin attacking the bunkers in 10 minutes. You'll be too busy trying to save people to prevent my escape. But Rowe had made the same mistake he accused human officers of making. He had focused on tactical calculations while missing the human element of the situation. The bunker doors began opening, not because the all-clear had been given, but because people were choosing to come out and fight. Students and faculty emerged, carrying whatever weapons they could find. Wounded personnel supported each other as they took defensive positions. What are they doing? Rowe demanded. They should stay in the bunkers where they're safe. They're choosing to stand together instead of hiding separately, Nari explained, because they understand that survival isn't about individual preservation. It's about preserving what matters most about the people you serve with. The aircraft began their final attack run just as 300 people spread across the camp in coordinated defensive positions. Instead of trying to protect themselves, they worked together to create overlapping fields of fire that made aerial assault nearly impossible. Dr. Rowe's aircraft found themselves facing not helpless targets hiding in bunkers, but an organized defense that anticipated their every move. The same tactical principles Nari had taught in her classes, but applied by dozens of people working in coordination. The battle lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, 6 enemy aircraft had been destroyed by ground fire. The remaining attackers retreated rather than face the coordinated resistance. Dr. Rowe sat in the communication center staring at tactical displays that showed his complete defeat. This outcome was not predicted by any of my psychological models. Because your models were based on studying isolated individuals under extreme stress, Nari told him. You missed the most important factor in human survival psychology, which is, we don't survive alone, we survive by carrying each other, the burden of command decisions, the weight of tactical choices, the responsibility for protecting something larger than ourselves. When you share those burdens, they become manageable instead of overwhelming. Alliance reinforcements arrived 4 hours early, guided by the continuing communication signals from the camp. They found Dr. Rowe in custody and his remaining followers, surrendering without resistance. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Rowe's experiments. He had spent 5 years infiltrating Alliance databases and recruiting disaffected military personnel. His goal was not just to discredit human tactical doctrine, but to prove that cooperation between species was impossible when survival was at stake. I believed that extreme stress would reveal the fundamental selfishness of human nature, Rowe explained during his interrogation. I thought that given enough pressure, you would always choose individual survival over collective welfare. What made you change your mind? Admiral Park asked. Tonight I saw 300 people voluntarily leave protective shelters to fight alongside someone who had made difficult tactical decisions throughout her career. They didn't follow orders. They didn't act from military discipline. They chose to trust each other when survival was uncertain. Dr. Rowe was sentenced to lifetime detention for war crimes, but his research contributed to significant changes in Alliance military training. His psychological analyses, combined with Nari's practical experience, became the foundation for new approaches to command decision-making and survivor trauma. 6 months later, Nari stood in the rebuilt academy addressing a new class of cadets. The archive wing had been reconstructed with expanded facilities and improved security. But more importantly, the teaching methods had changed completely. The old archives contained records of battles and tactics and strategic decisions, she told her students. The new archives contain something more important: stories of individuals who served, personal accounts of how they made difficult choices and lived with the consequences.